Well, welcome to episode 1 of season 2 of the Event Pro Show. If you've been following along so far, thank you so much. I'm really excited about this season coming up. We have some great guests, including this episode. We just recorded this episode. This is with Cameron McGee. He is the founder and operator of Avad 3 out of Northwest Arkansas. In my opinion, one of the best event production AV companies in the country right now. And he's been growing that business for quite a while, and they're still growing, still doing some amazing work. And I'm excited about his next 20 years of his career to see what he's going to do. But he stopped by, and we talked a lot about AV and how we can work better with meeting planners, how meeting planners can utilize AV better, how to understand their budgets, a little bit more, how to get more out of their AV partners. Lots of things that might be interesting to you. But most of all, like all my guests, I just want you to meet Cameron, and I want you to follow his story as well. So I hope you enjoy this episode 1 of season 2 of the Event Pro Show. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Event Pro Show, your ultimate guide to the world of corporate events. Whether you're a corporate event planner, experiential marketing pro, producer, technician, or anyone involved in creating exceptional events, this podcast is your go-to resource for valuable insights, expert tips, and inspiring stories from the industry's leading professionals.
Well, thank you for joining us on this first episode of season 2 of the Event Pro Show. And I am your host, Seth Mackey. I'm the CEO of LEMG. We're an event production company based out of Charlotte. And I have one of my favorite production people joining us today. Cameron, I'm just going to read your bio real quick to set you up so people know. I know who you are, but I want people to know who you are. So today's guest is Cameron McGee. He's been chasing his calling since he was 12 years old when he wandered up to the sound booth at his church and never looked back. From launching Avad 3 out of his college dorm room to building it into a national production company serving conferences and summits across the country for clients including Walmart and even the White House. Cameron has made his mission to create distraction-free events while teaching planners how to budget smarter, write better RFPs, and lead with confidence. He's a champion for event pros and production crews alike, which I can speak for sure. He's also a private pilot. He's a 90s country cover band drummer and at heart, still a teacher who just happens to run a production company. Cameron McGee, welcome to the show.
That's a crazy bio. That makes it sound better than it is. So I appreciate it, Seth. Thanks for kicking it off.
Well, one thing I forgot when I was looking at your stuff before this is did you get your degree in teaching or did you teach early on?
Both, yeah. I always wanted to do audiovisual, but I'm from Arkansas. And so I'd done it at my church, and I'd asked my parents, like, hey, where can I get a full-time job doing this? And we literally, no joke, we looked and there weren't any jobs. And so the conclusion my father and I came to was like, well, this isn't a full-time career, son. And so it was like, I'm going to go be a high school history teacher. And then I guess just run an AV business on the nights and weekends, like a wedding videographer. That was the literal plan. So yeah, my degree's in education. I did some teaching right out of college and just tried to quickly build Avad 3 because this is really my craft is AV, but I have the heart of a teacher for sure.
I think that's something that I would have never seen coming, but I think someone that's running a business like you're running, the skill of teaching is so powerful. I have another friend that runs a production company, and one of his like later career passions is like he loves to teach people what we do. So that's like a superpower, you know. And I've seen you're really good at like walking people through things methodically. So it's definitely a skill you have that other people in AV might not have. It's pretty cool.
I appreciate it. That's really the only reason I agree to do shows like this. And I'm really comfortable today because I know you and I've known you for a decade, so we're old friends. But I do shows like this because I do love teaching people and almost just being a translator. I know you feel the same way. You know, audiovisual and production is a decent chunk of most event budgets. I think I saw you posted it's like top 5 or something. But it's a bit of a foreign topic to a lot of planners. And so all I want from this episode is to help teach and help educate and just help provide some almost continuing education in a very unsophisticated, unstructured industry compared to banking or something where there's all these formal things. My wife's an ER nurse. There's all these formal, continuing education things. I just want to be helpful. And so I'm looking forward to talking through a few topics today and just helping people learn more about this stuff.
Well, I love it. Thank you for being here. So let's just kick it off. I alluded to it in your bio, but How did you get your start in AV?
Yeah, I've got kind of a country story, I guess. I don't know. I mean, country is some people would think of it, but I'm from Arkansas, and so I just got involved at my church when I was 12,
Mm-hmm.
and just started helping in the booth on Sunday nights and Sunday mornings, and it was a big church, and so there was a pretty sophisticated audio visual lighting system. But gear aside, there was a really kind gentleman who just really saw me as somebody that my heart was just there to help. My heart was there to serve, and found a way to use a 12-year-old boy. I was just like, I'll run the cables. I couldn't really do the sophisticated things that this professional was doing for the church, but I was able to run cable and clean up and help, and he used me. And I don't want to get too spiritual. It's not a Christian podcast, but that's really what my life is devoted to. Is I've got a little bit, and I want to use it to serve others.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's biblical, and I think it's leadership at its purest form is just serving others. And so yeah, that's how I got my start, was helping in church, and just got ignited around the craft of AV. I could have just as easily gotten ignited around football or video games or something, but for some reason, audiovisual resonated with me, and that mentor really made the way, and I've just been committed to it ever since. I'm 35, so I don't know that math, but I've been doing it for a long time.
Well, you definitely, there's people that like football and like, pickleball or something, but you like started a company out of your dorm room. So like, I guess, have you always been entrepreneurial, or were you the kid that had like lemonade stands and stuff? Or was it just like, if I'm going to keep doing this, I guess I got to make some money, and it just all kind of started putting together, in your college years?
Yeah, both. And I think I became accidentally entrepreneurial. There's no one else in my family that's ever done really the small business route. My family, my wife's family, I'm kind of the odd duck that I am self-employed, so to speak. Everybody else is a 35-year employee of the year,
Mm-hmm.
model. And I think I scared her parents and my parents and everybody who cared about me when I said I was going to kind of jump off the high dive. But I jumped off the high dive from my dorm room, and
Mm-hmm.
I encourage other young people to try small business, before they're 35 and married and have two young boys like we do. And it's harder to jump off that high dive at this age.
Right.
But I'm glad I did. But I became accidentally entrepreneurial because, as I said, I knew this is the craft I wanted to do, but there was nowhere to do it. There was no
Yeah.
full-time jobs to offer me a job to say, hey, you're good at AV. Why don't you come do it here? And
Right.
so I had to kind of create that. And yeah, I became accidentally entrepreneurial in other ways along the way. I was selling candy bars, when I was in school, out of a briefcase that almost got me kicked out of school. That's a fun story. I've done silly little, selling pizza after school, just different entrepreneurial endeavors. But all those really just helped me understand customer service and the value of a dollar and the trust that someone gives you when they give you that dollar. And nowadays, most of our budgets are $100,000 or something. There are a couple of zeros
Mm-hmm.
added to that dollar, but I think I learned early that if somebody's going to give you a dollar, you need to give them $1.10 back in value.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I always thought of it, and have even taught young people, if you can imagine finding a vending machine and you put a dollar in and it spits back $1.10, you are going to go find another dollar. And you might
Yeah.
tell three friends, you're not going to believe this vending machine I found. You got to bring your dollars over here. And really, that's good business. That's customer service. If whatever price you're charging, if you're giving back more value than you're charging, that's going to work. And people are going to come back three times and they're going to tell three friends. And that's really how Avad 3 has done well and has scaled larger than I ever dreamt or imagined, because we just believe in delivering more value than we're charging for.
Yeah, yeah. I could not have asked for a better segue into my next question.
Okay, go for
So
it.
thank you. But you mentioned before, as you know, AV or audiovisual is typically one of the probably top three expenses at a corporate event. So how would you explain the importance of that investment to a meeting planner? Around the concept of what you were saying, you obviously are thinking from a service perspective, you want to give someone what they perceive as the highest value. But beyond that, like, what is the importance as maybe a newer planner? Like this is so expensive. What am I getting? What's the value of this versus I'll just go to the venue and they're going to provide whatever they provide.
I love that question. It would be difficult to convince a meeting planner who's only been doing this for 18 months of the value. But it's actually really easy to convince a meeting planner that's been doing this for 18 years the value of quality production. And when I really think about, what we're doing and is it worth it, I have my doubts too, because production's expensive. And good production is even a little bit more expensive, but even just bad production, just the function of the crew and the truck and the gear, bad production costs a lot of money. And so I have my doubts sometimes, because we all want to make sure we're providing value. And so some of these budgets get expensive. If it's a week-long thing and there's multiple breakouts and all these rooms and stuff, like it gets expensive. Yeah. And I respect that. I respect those dollars. But we just got back, Seth. I'm at home today. I'm in our office, our 25,000 square foot building, not my house, but our home, our business home. And I got 2 emails from the 2 events we did last week. We were in Dallas for what I would call a large conference, and we were in Orlando for a medium conference. And the trucks just got home, and we were just unloading them. And I got an email from one of those clients, and this is a client who had used in-house AV for the history of their event, because it's a small conference. And so they took the leap, to use the high dive reference again, they took the leap this year, switching from in-house to what I would call a real production company, like you with LEMG, like me with Avad 3. And he sent me an email just saying thank you. And this is the founder's son. This is the big guy. And he said, what really surprised me, I should just read it, but I have this part memorized. He said, what really surprised me about y'all being there, and sorry, I'm saying y'all, I'm from Arkansas. He did not say y'all.
It's okay. I'm in the Carolinas. This sounds totally natural.
Y'all sounds good. It's fine. But he said, what surprised me about y'all being there was, he said, I had no idea for all the other years that I've been using in-house, how mentally taxing it was on me, and how little networking I was doing, and how little value I was able to add for the people that I was actually there for.
Yeah.
This is an event where he had sponsors there that he wanted to thank and make sure they came back and saw value. He had teammates there. He had other vendors there. And he said, I didn't realize, real production is really high touch service. Yeah. And with that, he said, I wasn't thinking about, our keynote speaker who we flew in just for this and wanted to make sure their message landed. I wasn't thinking about the venue needing to come in and flip the room, because your crew coordinated that for me. I wasn't thinking about or worried about getting the records uploaded overnight so that our remote editor could get the sizzle done for our marketing. He said, I underestimated. We didn't spend that much more to go with y'all, because the in-house prices have really gotten out of control. And that's when they started looking, is they said, we used to use in-house because it's convenient, or we perceived that it was cheaper or saves on logistics for the truck. But the truck was only a few $1,000s of this, and really it wasn't that much more to try y'all. And I think, this is bold of me to say on the air, but I think we earned a client for life. I say that figuratively, knock on wood, but they were just blown away by the difference. And so what I would say to an 18-month planner, someone who maybe used to be an EA and now they're a planner, or just came out of a comm role and now they're a planner, would be listen to the 18-year veterans in the industry, which there's not many of, because events are a lot of hard work. Not many people stay in it for 18 years. But if you're new and you're looking at those quotes, consider the intangibles of the time that you do have on site being spent for higher value things, like keeping those sponsors happy, keeping the keynote happy, keeping the whoever aligned. And that's really what you're getting. You're probably spending, 10, 20% more max, and you're getting 50% more in value. But it's expensive, and I respect that. And it's already expensive. And I think that's why a lot of people stick with in-house. They say, this is already insurmountably expensive. I can't imagine spending a little bit more. But in a way, they're spending a lot and getting a little. And if they would spend maybe a little more, they would get a lot.
Yeah, that's good. That was a great summary of the cost of it. And I think where companies like ours come into play is organizations get to a point where in-house just isn't cutting it, and for whatever reason. And there's got to be a little bit of pain, where you're like, yes, it's crazy expensive. However, I'm so stressed out, or they're not able to complete the vision that we have or represent our brand the way we do everywhere else in the market. So we need our live events to reflect that. And I do agree with you. Once they make the shift they realize that it is so service driven that it's very difficult then for them to see not doing that next time because of that stress level that they were carrying that they thought they just had to endure. But you really don't have to if you're working with a great company, So, but I do agree with you. Either way, it's going to be a lot of money. It's expensive. People are expensive. Gear is expensive. We know that. But a callback to what you were saying is, you put in $1, you get $1.10 back. That's really a great picture of working with a great AV company, for sure. It's that service touch that you didn't know you were missing, but you actually really needed. And carrying that on as meeting planners begin to think about their upcoming events. So as it pertains to AV and creative design, I know you have some thoughts on this, but what are some ideas in the weeks and months or even a year or more leading up to the event, how they can better prepare and set themselves up to work with a company like yours?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I want to provide so much value, in the brief time we have. And when I think about meeting planners, what I think about what really stresses them out is cost overruns. And what I really think stresses them out as well is not looking great in front of their boss. And we've all got different bosses and things. But I think those two things kind of come to a point at one moment in the event planning life cycle. And that's kind of what I wanted to zoom in on for a second. There's one moment where you don't want to look like you've got your foot in your mouth, and you also don't want to start having cost overruns. And it's about 12 hours before your event starts. About 12 hours before your event starts, you're probably in the middle of doing rehearsals. If you're doing a reasonably important event. Now, not all events need rehearsals. If you're just throwing a reception, I don't want to say just a reception. There's some very important receptions for the governor's daughter or something like that. But if you're throwing an event where, maybe something's going wrong in the background, but just don't look over there behind the catering, that doesn't need a rehearsal. But that's not the type of events that we do. You said in the bio, we're honored to serve Walmart. We're honored to serve the White House. I got a text from the White House yesterday morning, about something. I was just helping them out on something. Those events matter. They really matter. And that means 12 hours before the event, you're in rehearsals. And rehearsals are really a moment where, going an hour or too long is going to quickly get expensive, like very quickly get very expensive. And that's really almost the rubric scorecard I see of an executive leader coming in and saying, okay, event planner person, man or woman, you've been working on this for 9 months. It's tomorrow. How are we looking? That's when they're at peak stress. You're at peak stress. Other things are going wrong with other vendors. Maybe the catering's late or forgot the dietary thing, or the tent company showed up and everything's covered in mud or whatever. But at that moment, the executive's probably wanting to make sure their slides look right. And they're probably wanting to just do a quick sound check and get a feel for the room. And what I see more often than not is that's a moment that event planners are underprepared for. Because they don't know production, because they don't know audiovisual, because they're not super into that. They've probably thought of just about everything on the room block, on the registration, on maybe the dietary needs, maybe the catering, maybe the decor, all of those things that they want to spend time on mentally, they stay there. And so they've got that dialed. But maybe their mind doesn't love production, it doesn't love AV, and I don't blame them. There's things about the industry that I don't love either. I don't hang out in those areas. It's natural. Yeah. But that's a moment where if you've really done your work leading up to that, things don't have to get expensive and you don't have to be embarrassed. But I want to camp out here for a minute. I want to talk about this for a few minutes, because really decisions at that point, they're almost too late. You're kind of careening towards a timeline. And so what I want to talk about, everybody understands they need to get their content to the AV crew sooner. Every AV crew in the history of man has said, can I get that content a little sooner? So everybody knows they need to get their content sooner, but darn it, for some reason they just can't. And I've thought a lot about this, what's going on? And I'm a big believer that anything is permissible as long as expectations are set. And I believe that as meeting planners, and I consider myself a partner to the meeting planner, we're not doing a good enough job of setting expectations with the presenters and perhaps their admins earlier. We're not doing a good enough job of saying, hey, you're going to have an on-stage rehearsal at 4 p.m. the day before. To be ready for that, we need you to come by at 10 a.m. the day before. And we've got this other room set up over here, this speaker ready room. And we've got a couple PowerPoint machines and a couple of downstage monitors, confidence monitors, a couple of TVs back here. And we're going to have you click through it then. And that's going to be the first time that maybe your deck left legal and comms and maybe made it onto our machine. And we need to make sure that font loaded right. We need to make sure that build happened right. We need to make sure that the hyperlinked video played on click the way that you want it to, and that all is good in that deck. And by the way, to be ready for that, you're going to need to make sure that the comms team and legal has approved that deck 24 hours before then, which means you probably need to submit it a week before then, because the legal team is not as fast as the AV team. AV team's used to hour by hour. Legal's like, can we look at this for a week? And so really those timelines, and it's ironic because all the other event timelines are just like this. Event planners are so good at, okay, this is my attrition day on room blocks. This is when I have to have the BEOs filled out for chef, but they're missing it on content. And then therefore the executive is showing up. They haven't preloaded it. It's still stuck in legal review. They're still amending it. A font is missing. Things that are going to make that crew go into overtime. And things are going to make the first impression that the event planner makes on the executive an impression of being underprepared. And that's, if there's one topic I want to make sure we talk about today, just because you and I have been in those rehearsals literally in the same room together, it's that moment and backing up that timeline so that you really look awesome to that presenter.
And I think a little behind the scenes of what you're talking about really is you've also performed on stage, right? And and I have as well. And there is something, if you've never done that, we work in an industry. If you produce corporate events or you have somehow are doing corporate events, most of your speakers are amateurs. And I've talked about this before, but your stage is full of amateurs. So everything we can do to set them up that when they step out in front of people, they're fully confident and ready to go. It makes such a psychological difference to someone on stage, because that's one of the most vulnerable times in someone's life. So everything you just talked about isn't just about setting the AV company up, and it is, but also it's letting the speaker know that we're fully ready for you. And when you go out, you know what to expect. This is exactly what you're going to get. And they deliver better. Your attendees get a better experience. Your people on stage get a better experience. And it's even your C-suite. There's very few executives that I would consider professional level speakers. Even at that level, they need to feel like at their most vulnerable, you got their back. And so you have to kind of schedule that in.
I like what you just said. I mean, we don't have to hang out here too long, but you just said it's one of the most vulnerable moments of their life. That's really good.
Absolutely.
Stuff. It's certainly one of the most vulnerable moments of their year, because it's probably the biggest day of the year for maybe a C-suite. It's a CFO. It's the annual moment, and that's the biggest stage they'll be on, the biggest audience, perhaps even in a virtual component or people streaming. It's like, now I feel like I'm on TV. So it's a vulnerable moment in their year. And the best thing you can do for a vulnerable person is professionalism. It's saying, it's not our first. That's really good. That stability, almost Maslow's hierarchy of needs, of just, you've got them. You're ready for them. I think
and what it feels like being a musician. Like if you walk out, hey, I just got here. I was late getting here. I didn't get a sound check. Okay, well, let's just go do it. And you feel kind of like, ugh, when you walk out. I hope it works, because it's going to be really embarrassing if it doesn't. Versus you got there with extra time, do a great sound check. You're feeling good, got something to eat. You relax, walk out. You have a great show. It's good. No different. It's humans. What does a human need to feel really good out on that stage? And everything you said. This is why, from a meeting planner perspective, that actually is probably the most important thing to pay attention to. It might seem like, all the checklists are, and they are important, but everyone's there to see that person's there and putting themselves out there. So really supporting them. I think that's awesome. That was great, Cameron. I think we could probably do a whole episode just on rehearsals, because I believe in it so much. And it goes also back to your investment. Why should you invest in that extra time? Because of all the reasons we just talked about. So everybody's under a deadline. I think, I don't know if this is correct, and I promise I'll stop saying things like pre-COVID, post-COVID soon, but I feel like pre-COVID, we had more time. Everything's more compressed now, and it hasn't really stretched back out a ton as far as the lead time we get thinking about shows. But on that note, not everybody wants to talk directly to a brand new vendor. So they put together RFPs. If you're looking at an RFP and someone wants to know, I don't have a ton of time, but you're guiding them on at least put XYZ on an RFP. How would you counsel them? What should they put on an RFP for AV services?
Yep.
It's like
Yeah,
basic.
I'll just like almost like five points real quick. Like what would I put? I would absolutely put the audience size. I would absolutely put the max number of presenters on stage at any point. I would absolutely put a loose version of the schedule of the event, the agenda, and you don't have to have all your ducks in a row. It can just be, we're going to have an opening keynote on Tuesday and a closing general session on Thursday afternoon. And we've got an awards thing Wednesday night. We don't know the hours yet. So that's the third thing I put. Fourth thing I would put is essentially the contract details of the facility, not the rates, but just we have access to the La Perla Ballroom starting at 7 a.m. Monday. We have to be out by 11:59 p.m. Thursday evening. And we, basically the contractual
constraints. Yeah, the actual constraints we're working with.
Constraints a great word. And then I think fifth, I would you don't have to share like first name, last name, email address, phone number. If you feel like this RFP is going out to 15 people, which I would never recommend sending an RFP to 15 people, but it seems like that's becoming more common. So if you're wanting to keep it a little secure, you don't have to say the contact information. But the last thing I think I would say is a fifth thing is I would put almost the cast of characters that are going to be involved in this project. So for instance, my name is John Doe, and I'm the CMP for this financial conference. Also, you're going to be in contact with our chief of staff, who's going to coordinate all rehearsals. And we have an in-house graphic designer, but we do not have an in-house videographer. And so we're going to contract that as well. These are the 4 people that you're going to be working. That helps so much because a lot of the cost is not really in if we're going to have 6 microphones or 8. So often I see people really fixate on like the microphone count, and they'll get very specific. We need 5 handhelds. Well, that's marvelous. Whether you need 4 or 8 is a $500 delta. It's a $500 plus or minus in the grand scheme of an $80,000 budget or something. Don't sweat the microphone count. But knowing that we've got to be out by midnight on Thursday night in this hypothetical thing I just made up, that's important. That's an overtime loadout, not a regular time loadout. Knowing that you have a graphic designer in-house, and so we can count on all the decks being in good shape when they come to us, completely different than if this is a TED Talk thing and every presenter every hour is a wild card presenter and they don't come from your organization. And so there is no graphic design kind of filtration QC person. Those types of things I think would be just off the cuff 5 things I'd put in the RFP. So often I see people not know what to put, and you write about this all the time, Seth. So you put out a ton of stuff on LinkedIn, on your website, LMG. We write about it from time to time. There's stuff out there people can find. But as a macro guidance, I see people omitting more in the name of like legality or trying to keep it very sterile, when really the more you omit, the less helpful it is for the bidder. And really it's not the bidder against you, it's the less helpful it is for you. The more you can share, even if it's an 80% guess or roughly Wednesday night, we're having this awards thing, we don't exactly know. It may not even be in this ballroom, we may go off site, but just sharing that is so helpful. But I just see people getting so much more legal and sterile. As you said, they're getting much more rushed in their timelines. And I would rather them share some things and it deviate a little bit. Whereas some people get nervous that they don't have it exactly precise, and so they omit it. And I think as a macro guidance, I would recommend the opposite.
Yeah, I agree. There has to be enough detail that keeps the costs from oscillating so radically, because if you want the Academy Awards, we can do that. If you want like an association level, like a regional association level 2-screen setup, we can do that too. But if you give no guidance and then you're comparing all these quotes and you're just going with the lowest bidder, I think you're doing a disservice to everybody involved. You really have to at least harness it enough that people have some type of guidance. And that's why, recommending just some budget range helps too with that. So that's awesome. And I think it can save people money. I think they're trying to save money by not.
Yes.
And then they end up getting poor proposals back. And
that's
then
right.
they might go with somebody that's just a wild card that ends up being a bad experience. And I know you have a lot of thoughts on event planners and how they can reduce AV expenses. So I want to get into that a little bit. Do you have any other ideas, like quick tips of, hey, meeting planners, here's some ways that you can reduce your AV expenses, or use these assets that are already on site and you don't need to do this, or anything that comes to mind, or things that you've seen lately?
Yeah, and I'll just literally do things that are on the top of my mind because I have seen them lately. In a meeting I had with someone this morning, in a site visit I'm doing this Saturday, in shows that I was on site for last week, I'll share a few things that I think would be top of mind. Everybody always says this, so it's probably a broken record to say, get your production partner involved sooner. I'm sure everybody says that, so who needs to hear that? But I want to kind of detail why. It's easy for any contractor or vendor to say, get me involved sooner, but why? Well, I did a site visit recently where they had booked 2 big ballrooms, and they were going to do general session over here and expo and meals over here. And just at the last minute, they said, hey, can you pop onto this site visit? And I always give them a hard time because they said, can you come to the site visit Thursday? And I said, well, when you say Thursday and refer to the date as a day of the week, you must mean this Thursday. So I always give them a hard time about how late they asked me to come to the site visit. But I jumped in, and they said that I don't know that they put a number to it, but it was 5 figures. I saved them a lot of money by coming to that site visit because I switched which thing was happening in which room. That it was funny. They'd picked the rooms. It wasn't off the chandeliers, but it was something quite arbitrary that made them say, this will be here, this will be here. Mm-hmm. And by coming in and saying, well, really, if you look at this and look stuff that they weren't going to look at, think details with the rigging, thought about the loading dock, labor, union, so many things, and saved them so much money, and it wasn't money that was in their budget that just made headroom. It wasn't like, oh, you just opened up our budget. It was things they had not planned for that were going to be cost overruns that I just saved them to get their budget back to where it needs to be for their boss. And so they were so glad that I invested 24 hours, a plane ticket. I think I booked with miles. It was inconsequential, for me to pop into this site visit. But I saved them so many of those things. Another thing I would say is look at your schedule with your production partner as well. And that hypothetical thing I was talking about earlier, where like maybe you get the room Monday and you've got to be up by Thursday night. And so there's an awards thing here and here. It may be worth asking, we're indifferent on if the awards are Tuesday night or Wednesday night. Do you guys have any opinion on that from a cost saving standpoint? And the production may say, well, if you'll do it Wednesday night, it's going to allow for rehearsals to be this day during business hours. Whereas if you need to do it Tuesday night, we're going to need to have rehearsals late on Monday, and that's going to be an overtime rehearsal. Whereas, really, we're sitting around. Nobody likes to have the AV team sitting around, but we are stuck sitting around for 4 hours this afternoon because you have everybody in breakouts. And the general session crew could totally be punching through that show if the awards are Wednesday night. Simple things like that so often I'll find out later, we put them Wednesday night because the catering menu actually made more sense. And it's like, you could have just flipped that. There's so many little decisions that I think are made early in planning off of, I don't want to say arbitrary. I'm not saying disrespectful that all the decisions are from production. Please don't hear me say that. But getting a perspective from production on some of those things before the ink is dry, before the paint is dry and then the production company's coming in later and later, more last minute than ever. And you're discovering those cost overruns, and then you're upset with your production company because it's, why is this in overtime and what's going on? And so I would look at the schedule with your production company. I would look at the venue with your production company. And I think maybe last, I'll kind of echo something you said about people are trying to save money by sharing less. And in the last year, I've been so surprised how much we have saved people money when they've shared more.
Yeah.
And I mean this in a very selfless way. I'm going to say it in a selfish way to make my point. Moments where they were about to spend maybe $30,000 on printed materials. And by asking us, to look over them real quick, we realized we can do all this with digital signage and LED in a way that's better for the planet, more sustainable for you, and it's going to allow you to make revisions the night before. Whereas maybe the FedEx has a 40-day deadline where everything has to be submitted. And so people almost sharing more, which, again, it sounds selfish because I'm suggesting an idea here that's going to make my invoice larger. but they were going to spend $30,000 on print. They spent $20,000 on digital with us. So I feel selfless that I saved them 10 for something that's a better sustainable move. It looks cooler and it's more agile. But they would have never shared that in an RFP with a stranger. That's a trust that the client has after being with us for a year, where they're kind of showing their hand on like, okay, the production budget was 100,000. We're spending 30,000 on print or whatever. And we can kind of speak up about that and say, did you say $30,000 in print? My goodness, for that, we could do LED. Whereas in an RFP, no one is sharing, by the way, we also have this $30,000 budget line item over here, because they're fearful that production is going to just kind of get their claws in it, because they fear what they don't know and they don't understand. And
That's
in
right.
my
Or
experience,
they just they don't know what they don't know. They don't think it's relevant.
to share, right?
I have like this utopian dream of like the perfect relationship, and I don't know if it'll ever exist, is that in planning, you're like a year out around a table. Everybody's around a round table that is involved with that event. And there's a rep from like the AV company as well, along with everybody else, catering and the venue and the meeting planning and the executive team. And everybody's talking about ideas and come to it in a productive way, you know. And I know there's a time when one person just needs to make decisions and move things forward, but I feel the same way about venue design. When you go into these venues, you're like, did they consult with the people that go in
Never.
all the time?
Never.
No. And if they did, they cut it long
Yeah.
before
Yeah,
because of
value
budget
engineering.
reasons. Yeah, but like that's the dream, is like you develop. This is something I've talked about a lot, and I think you do a really good job with your clients. Is the first time, you know, you're trying to win business for sure, but really what I think is most productive for everybody is develop long-term relationships so that you can pull out your whole, you know, show portfolio for the year and bring your team members in and let's talk about it. When we're ideating about it, can we just talk, you know, like, and everybody knows, they trust each other enough that it's like, you're not trying to extract the most revenue.
No.
You're trying to give that $10 back, you know,
Yeah.
like, and that means too, and I know you're like this, that, hey, even if that means we're going to bill you less for this event next year, because we're going to show you how to do it a little bit better. And that's the kind of relationship that I wish we could get to with all clients, but it doesn't always work that way. But that's the dream.
It's a dream, and I love that. I love that dream set. And it's not. I did a client call this morning where we lowered our invoice because we were looking at something, and I said, "You could get this from so and so, and you could get this from so and so, and we could cut a truck." You know, I was saving them money, and that was foreign to them. But that's good customer service.
It
you know,
is.
if I had an issue with Dropbox or, you know, a digital service, I expect their customer service person to help me hop on and say, "Hey, we need to lower our seats or our subscription." And even though they're lowering their invoice, I expect them to help me do that, because that is customer service. And I think people are so afraid of sales that they're not leaning into the customer service. I like your idea. You know, this imaginary table with everyone sitting around it. I've seen that table, and most meeting planners call that a pre-con. You've seen a pre-con. Everyone's at the venue. It's the day before the load in. The city's there, the CVB's there, the venue's there, catering's there, everyone's there. If we could have an 11-month out pre-con, I think you're onto something. If you could, everybody's given their 2 hours to that pre-con. Then if we could just schedule that 11 months ago, that's when the Play-Doh is still agile and the paint hasn't dried. At the pre-con that's the day before, it's too late. You know, it's way too late. But all of those people could contribute the same 2 hours of their lives 11 months ago and say, "Hey, let's work together here, and this could be like this, and this could be like this." And in my experience in the service industry, most people would be eager to share and give some free advice and some free consulting, because they're rarely asked their opinion. You know, imagine a server, when you say, "Hey, what do you recommend?" They light up. "Oh, if it were me, I would get the shrimp. It's actually delicious here. Don't get the so-and-so." But they're not always asked. And so it's fun to imagine this 11-month pre-con and asking the craftspeople, "What would you recommend here in your expertise?" and doing what they say. I think that's awesome stuff.
Yes, do this, do that. Don't waste your time with this. You know, and on that note, one more technical question for you. What are AV assets that you see out in the field that you think clients consistently underutilize? So I'll start. I'll give you an example. Giant LED rectangle screen that is just one stagnant image the whole time. I think that's such a waste. There's other ways to accomplish that. That's something that in that situation I'd advise. You don't need that LED wall. There's other ways to do that. However, you do have it. So here's what you could do to make it more compelling. But are there any other things that you're seeing that people do because they think maybe that's just in their habit, but you're like, you could do so much more with that and maybe you don't know?
Yeah, I'll do two because that was going to be my first one as well. There's no use in doing it. Used to be big projection blends. This amazing blend stack.
Yep.
That's an LED
Same
wall now.
Same idea.
Technology's changed. It's the same issue. It's the same philosophy. So I'll add a second and a third. I think probably a second would be not actually pushing the crew. This is kind of weird for me to say because I really care about the technicians. But most corporate events, after the first hour or so, the audio tech is pretty bored out of their minds. Whatever you're talking about, legal stuff or doctor stuff or banking stuff. And so the first thing I would say that they're underutilizing is they're actually underutilizing the aptitude of these brilliant men and women who are serving on the crew of their event. We did an event recently, small crew. I think it was a 6-person crew. An average crew for us is 10. This was a smaller crew. We also do crews that are 30, but this is a smaller crew. I think the client was used to, at their budget, just the audio tech's job is to kind of turn the microphones on and off and make sure they don't feed back.
Right.
But we had a great audio tech. He is an ace, and so we kind of asked, like, hey, would you like some walk-up songs? Every time somebody takes a stage, would you like a walk-up song for them? Because he'd love to do them, and we'd love to make some VOGs for you. And you don't have to plan too much in advance. We used to have to pre-record those the day before. We use an AI tool from now. We've worked on the phonetics, and we can type it in, and it'll play it. And it sounds fantastic. So let's do VOGs from the AI tool. We'll PFL it first to make sure it says Mackey correctly. Okay, Seth Mackey got it. Roll it, and we can do the AI VOG. We can do a walk-up song, and the audio tech wants to. He's bored out of his mind. He's excited to pick which Back in Black song, from AC/DC, which part of the chorus are we going to play for this walk-up, and so I that's the first thing. I think they're underutilizing the crew's aptitude, and in a respectful way, not pushing the crew to say, you guys sure are expensive and you're sitting around. I mean, that's no way to get anybody to do something, but to say, hey, do you guys have any ideas? What could you do to make it? It's so fun to ask the crew. And then I think the third idea, you did the first, I'll do the second, the third. I don't think people are doing enough with lighting. And I think so often we do a disservice to the event production industry, and we refer to it as AV, the audio visual. If it's just the in-house, maybe your event has grown a lot, but from the early days of your event, you just did AV. There was no L for lighting. But there's a whole other department, and I am amazed. Some of our most beautiful shows, the ones that I'm taking pictures of and can't wait to put on LinkedIn and clients are proud of, and they're getting a photographer in there, and I'll go look at their quote, and I'm amazed how inexpensive a little bit of lighting can be. We've added, every show has to have a little bit of face light, a little bit of colored up lighting, maybe make the blue, look or something. But I'm amazed when we've just added just a few $1,000s of lights and a real lighting tech who, again, has aptitude, and told them, okay, make everything calm during the keynote, but as soon as they're done, let's have some energy in here. And when we go to break, let's do something else. And if we're going to give an award later, let's have something, And so I think I'm getting long-winded because I'm passionate about lighting, but I would lean into just a little bit of money in lighting goes a long way.
Yeah, I agree. Those are great. I love the people approach. You have these talented people sitting there. They're being hired for the event, and they do events every day, and they see so much. And a lot of them are, they have ideas just preloaded, ready to go, and they could make your event that much better. It's just by asking. That really didn't cost a whole lot more, or a small investment in lighting. I love it. Lighting is game changer when you have a great LD in the room. Utilize them, like unlock them, let them do the thing. I think that's amazing. I have a one future question for you. What do you think corporate AVL will look like in 10 years?
I think it's going to be a lot more remote audience. People, during COVID, everything went virtual. After COVID, the buzzword all over all of the channels was hybrid. I think everybody understands that. But I think there's going to be moments where people engage a broader audience for only a portion of the event. If it's a 3-day conference and we need the whole department there, if it's a corporate meeting, hey, we're going to have all of this planning department is going to have this conference, but we are going to have the CFO do a keynote in the middle. And, we'd like, actually the whole division to be able to tune into that if they want to. I think that's the future a little bit. I also think, presentation wise, there's a lot of time and effort and energy put into those moments, and there's not much done with it afterwards. It kind of evaporates a little bit. And we work with a friend of mine now. We've become friends, but he kind of started as just kind of a typical videographer, but he's become really passionate about repurposing a lot of the content that's captured at these events. And he's renamed his whole business and everything Echo. And he loves the concept of, like, if you're going to say it, let's make it echo and echo again and echo again. And so much of our social media.
So just a side note, Sam owns Echo. He's going to be a guest in a few weeks. So keep listening along. Wait. Sam's awesome. Yeah.
Sam McDonald with Echo, when he comes on, pay attention to that man. But he's really onto something where so much energy is put into these events. And it's kind of a FOMO thing. If you missed it, you missed it. And I get that for, like, the networking and the energy and the experience. We want people to jump over the hurdle, get on the plane, go to the event. But there's some great sound bites. There's some great stories told. There's some great moments that need to echo. So I think in the future, there will be portions of events that kind of the audience squishes like an accordion. It gets smaller, it gets bigger. And then I think
like that
also,
picture. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's dynamic ways that content can be enjoyed in different ways and where people are and at the time that they need, instead of everything's just, you have to be on site for those 3 days. That's it. And it's gone. Like all these beautiful things happen and it's just gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's wonderful. I love it. Well, Cameron, I always love talking to you. I'll always have. I mean, you're one of the entrepreneurs that I've gotten to watch from dream phase, like really hustling, to holy cow, you've done this amazing thing all the way through, and it's still rolling. You're still growing your business. So you've always been an inspiration to me, and I really appreciate you taking the time. And if people wanted to learn more about Avad 3 and about what you're doing, where should they go?
I just point everybody to LinkedIn. I don't add me on Facebook because you're just going to see pictures of my kids and my dog and my wife. Jump on LinkedIn and just add me as a friend. It's probably the appropriate business thing to say to follow my company, Avad 3, but just connect with me. If you actually listen to this and made it this far in the episode and thought this was cool, I'd like to be connected with you. I'd like to see your posts. I'd like you to see mine for the years to come. So yeah, it's Cameron McGee. My last name's a little unusual, Magee, but Cameron McGee on LinkedIn, and I'd love to be friends.
Love it. Well, thank you for joining us today, Cameron.
Yeah, thanks for doing the show, Seth. Good luck.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us on the Event Pro Show. This is episode 1 of season 2. I couldn't be happier that this is the kickoff to season 2. Thanks for joining us. But if you want to see our backlog, you can go to theeventproshow.com, where you can check out all sorts of people that touch corporate events and tips and tricks about AV and all sorts of stuff. So I would encourage you to join us there. But we will see you on the next one. Thanks so much. The Event Pro Show is a production of LEMG, video by Nick Barrett, audio and post-production by Prince Thompson. You can learn more about us at lemg.live.